Good morning,
Okay,
Trina.
sorry. Good morning, Captain Whitaker.
I first started writing this script, I think, in 1998 or 99. I was flying back from Europe for work, and a pilot sat next to me who was like deadheading, they call it. And he started talking to me, and it was driving me nuts, and I couldn't understand why, because I'm a friendly enough guy, but I just didn't really want to talk to this guy. And then it dawned on me, I was like, I don't want to know any commercial pilot. I want to believe that the guy that gets in that chair has it all going.
How you feeling today, sir?
A little tired. Quick turnaround for me, 10 turns in 3 days. Off tomorrow.
I don't want to know that his wife hates him or that he's divorced or like his life is in some desperate, depressed spiral. And then I had that great writer's moment of like, what if?
When a really good screenplay comes along, I have no choice other than to embrace it and go forward with it. I love the fact that sort of the dramatic engine of the movie was the complexity of these characters. They're all sort of shaded gray. There aren't the typical movie good guys, bad guys. The drama of the movie comes from the fact that all the characters in the movie are basically, to some degree, damaged, and that becomes the dramatic engine for the piece.
I have no more moves, all right? It's all on you right now.
I think the overriding story is about a man coming to clarity and finally putting his demons to rest or acknowledging his demons. But along with that, you get a really clear picture of how people inadvertently protect their demons and how other people, while they're trying to protect their own interests, enable people to continue using.
He's a great liar. He's in denial. He's addicted, and he's trying to save his behind through lies.
I've known you 11 years, Will.
Right.
You want to tell me that you and Trina went to dinner and you had 2 glasses of wine?
No.
Sounds like a nice restaurant. Now, which one was it?
You have to say that. It was an ordinary day, Margaret. I mean, it was an ordinary day. You know me. I was in shape to fly.
And ultimately, as he says, he couldn't tell one more lie when he had to look that young woman in the face and decide whether he was going to throw her under the bus in order to save his own behind. He couldn't do it.
Plane fell apart at 30,000 feet.
And the airline will try to prove equipment failure. Right. We should make the manufacturer responsible. Manufacturer, in turn, is going to try and prove poor maintenance of the equipment by the airline.
Or pilot error.
The framework of the movie is almost kind of like the framework of my own personal life. So for me, it was a lot of me kind of examining my own kind of issues and demons that I've had throughout my life as they relate to this character who is a big character who has like a big event that kind of happens in his life. And it scared me to death. I was like, what is that? And I just put it in a drawer and was like, well, I can't deal with that right now. Because I also was like, that's a movie no one will ever make. There had been a trend for the past few years, I think in the studio system, where they don't really make R-rated dramas. You can point to flowcharts that say, look, as far as business goes, they're not a good business. And it really wasn't until last year or 2 years ago when R-rated dramas started to do business, you know, and get notice, and they started to be the movies that people kind of talked about. And I think that really kind of helped because, you know, I've been trying to make this movie for so long that it was in a curve where this kind of movie was not really in favor.
I'm afraid that I'm going to use again. Do you understand?
And come with me.
There seems to be this kind of unwritten rule that if a movie's a drama, there's no room for comedy.
Honey, could you hustle us up a couple of daiquiris and a cocktail weenie? On second thought, just bring the booze. I brought my own weenie.
And I don't agree. I think that a movie that could be an emotional, dramatic story, there's plenty of room to have comedy in it and action in it and suspense. And this movie has all of that.
The fact that it fell into Robert Zemekis' hands and he was like, I want to do the movie, it just happens that he's a pilot. So he has a fascination and a mastery of flying that is something that made this material hit him right between the eyes.
Bob was very selective, as he always has been, with what the next project was going to be after we decided to move back into the live action world. And when this script came along, he said, here's something we should take seriously. And It was a very compelling story. He called it a little character piece.
Devious minds think alike. Don't go. I'll be quiet. It's nice to just sit and smoke with somebody.
That's what drove his interest in the screenplay.
When I read it, I couldn't stop turning the pages. And what's interesting about it is that the suspense in the movie comes from what are these characters going to do? It's not like there's a ticking bomb or a meteor is going to come and destroy the earth. And whenever you can find a screenplay that's got that kind of depth to it and that kind of complexity, it's a very rare thing nowadays. And to me, that's what kept me turning the pages. I wanted to see how this was going to resolve itself. What was going to happen to Whip's character?
And I gotta tell you, I'm in awe of what you did. The FAA and the NTSB took 10 pilots, placed them in simulators, recreated the events that led to this plane falling out of the sky. Do you know how many of them were able to safely land the planes? Not one.
We were so fortunate on this film to not only be presented with a very compelling screenplay, but also to have probably one of the greatest living actors interested in doing the film.
Denzel was always interested in the screenplay from early on when John Gatins wrote it. And when I read the screenplay, I saw Denzel in the part.
The screenplay came to me about a year or so before Bob was even involved. My agent, the last two screenplays he gave me were Safe House and Flight.
I'm sitting in my little office, and I see my cell phone ring, and I pick it up. I'm like, hello? Because it says, unavailable, and it's like, John Gatins? I'm like, yes? This is Denzel Washington, and I was like, hi. And he said, what are you doing Thursday night? I was like, what am I doing Thursday night? He's like, come have dinner with me.
Flight was a real page-turner and really interesting character.
He and I sat down for like 2 hours, and he told me like his reaction to the script and like how it had kind of struck many notes for him. So he kind of said, look, this is dangerous material, with a smile, with that kind of like Denzel smile. He's like, this is dangerous.
That turned out to just work out, perfectly. And the fact that he is one of the greatest actors that, is alive also just made everything perfect. I mean, it was like a dream come true to be able to work with him in this part.
I don't know how long a period of time it was, but then out of the blue, my agent called and said, Bob Zemekis is interested. I was like, what? Yeah, he's made many great films, and he hadn't done a live-action film since Castaway, since, 10 years or so. And he's a pilot, so it was perfect.
Cut! Good. Oh, good.
First time I sat down with Denzel to talk about the script, he immediately went to that place because he's an actor who he needs to know it all. So it's like he has a process by which like he immediately zeroed in on me and said, so tell me that story. Yes, I get that you did all of the research about every plane that's ever crashed and what could potentially happen to our plane in the movie. He said, but I really want to know about, what's your personal story? How did you come to this?
John understands that character with the things he's gone through in his life. It's a process. It starts with the writer's first idea, and it ends with the audience. So I was just a part of the process. There's no magic pill I take. And then on the day, you do the best you can, and the director takes the best of it. I got a lot of character work done with Bob and with John working on the script. It was somewhat different than it is in the final film. For example, there was no meeting in prison at the end. That was all added. The AA meetings were added. I think that was Bob Zemekis' idea. And I really enjoyed the process with John Gatins and Bob.
There was no way this movie was going to happen without the confluence of events, without Denzel Washington grabbing the script with both hands and saying, I want to play this role, and Robert Zemeckis, like, on the other side of the script saying, I'm going to make this movie.
What appealed to me about the screenplay was the complexity of this character and how we can be really good at our job and yet be harboring these demons that are inside us. This is what I saw in it that really appealed to me.
It's called The Most Fascinating Person That I've Never Met.
Let's roll, please.
Camera's A marker.
Let me quote from an investigative summary from 9:34 until 9:42. The events on the aircraft are, again I quote, bold and remarkable. By inverting the plane, Captain Whitaker arrested the descent and allowing him to execute a forced landing in an open field.
For the last decade, I was doing performance capture movies. And the thing that's great about performance capture movies, it's all about performance. So I was completely inspired and ready to get into a movie that's all about character.
I'm amazed at what Bob Zemeckis was able to do in basically 35 days. We only shot 35 days, and he made that movie look huge.
When you cast somebody like Denzel in a part like this, you can expect to see a real willingness on his part to go to some pretty uncomfortable places. You know, everyone wants to be liked and everybody wants to be thought of as the good guy, but he's got to unleash some demons to let this happen and kind of let the audience into the uglier side of us. So I think it will be very impactful to see as an audience member. You gonna shoot me? Can I come inside?
Yeah, come on inside. I'll shoot you inside.
He's so full and he's so intense and, I mean, brilliant. I mean, and heartbreaking. I mean, there's probably nearly every scene we do, he moves me tremendously. The truth of where he's going with this character is really humbling to watch somebody be that truthful to a character going on quite a ugly kind of journey. You need rehab with.
You think I need rehab? So you go to 2 AA meetings, I need rehab. Okay. Hey, look, don't do it. Jesus Christ, don't worry about me, okay? You just worry about yourself. Don't worry about me.
We are off the side of the freeway in Atlanta, Georgia. And as this is also the dawn of a day, it's the dawn of our story. This is the very beginning. This is where we meet our young heroine, so to speak.
Maybe raise it, you'll see her in your boot heels, and then just walk that way.
Okay.
Kelly Riley, when we saw her performance in a reading, it kind of stopped us all in our tracks. It wasn't someone who, you know, first came to mind, but we were riveted by what she did, and she just seemed sympathetic and real.
I'm just gonna smoke it. I haven't used needles in weeks.
Okay, no needles.
I was very fortunate enough to meet a man here in Atlanta. We called him the drug man. Someone to come in and tell you how to inject dope into your arm. It's a skill, you know, my parents would be proud of. But he, not only did he teach me that side of things, which is very basic, the gift he gave me was to talk about his addiction, and that psychology is what was interesting for me to apply.
We can all relate to it because so many of us have loved ones who struggle with this disease, and we can all relate to it in one way or the other.
Bob Zemeckis treats everybody with such respect and kindness, and this is the first time for me to work over here and to play an American for the first time. And I said, that's it. I'm going to be lost every time I go and work with another director.
He's just so easygoing and listens really carefully and, you know, asks you to do it again with this little flavor or not. The set is so relaxed and so orderly, it's fantastic.
When we talk about the script and we talk about our characters, it's clear that he also wants to go for the real deeper meanings and really sort of probe what's going on with this character.
So you're drunk?
He's a heavy drinker.
It's great that he's delving into this area where you kind of have to jump in with both feet. You can't lightly wade into this, and he's up to the task.
Yeah, so what we're thinking is, Peter's saying, He's just gonna come up and like, just give you the once-over. He's not gonna extend his hand, he's gonna say, yeah.
I hear you're some kind of pilot.
All right. Let's try it with the camera one.
I've worked for a lot of incredible directors, and some of them are really strong with dialogue or character or look. I get it now with Robert Zemeckis. He has all of it. He has the sphere of all of it in his mind.
I really enjoyed the process with Bob, and I would just sit in the room and work it out and work it out and work it out.
Denzel, being the captain of the aircraft, he was very interested in learning what, as a pilot, what are your main responsibilities? Doing the walk-around, that's the first thing that you're going to do when you get to the airplane. You want to look on the outside and say, what, if anything, is wrong, or do I have anything I need to report to maintenance?
Since September 11th, we couldn't be on the tarmac of a real airport, and we needed a jetway for our story. So we were able to build our own jetway so we could have Denzel's character actually work around a real environment with all the tugs and things that would be on a tarmac.
Hey guys, here we go! Rain!
Yeah, bring up the rain, guys. Action camera!
Because he is a pilot, Denzel felt the need to get in a simulator and train himself so that it became second nature.
We actually did takeoffs and tried to fly in the simulator, and this is what the pilots practice in, so that was great. I mean, I got a great job. You know, I get to drive trains one movie and fly planes the next.
The process began with just setting them in the seat and watching their eyes open up and the amazement of, holy cow, what are all these switches, buttons, and everything for?
Oh, copy. Here we go.
There's a visual? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I came in about 6-7 weeks ago for my first time, and I had a panic attack because it's so overwhelming with all these instruments and the cameras and buttons. But slowly over time, I feel really comfortable and I'm starting to understand which each thing means. And this is my favorite button. That means the seatbelts are off. that means you should put them on. Okay. Altimeter is 2999 cross check. 2999 cross check. Lights, pitot heat, de-ice on. Transponders check. Pre-flight checklist complete.
All right. Ready to go, Ken?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. Start pushing the throttles forward here. Brian and Denzel, I think they've done a really nice job because of their openness and their willingness and their anxiousness to learn.
A lot of times in the movie, we take a nosedive to pick up more speed.
Okay, now you want to do that? Go ahead, put it into a nosedive. All right, and then what he calls for is speed brakes.
Speed brakes.
Just pull them back. There you go. Good. But then he says, put the gear down.
Gear down.
Overspeed.
And that's what you would hear in the airplane.
Gears down, I don't think hydraulics is the problem, sir.
We need to dump the fuel. Do it!
In the fiction of our film, there's a mechanical failure, and when you're implying a mechanical error, you couldn't go to an airliner and say, hey, can I use your aircraft? Because then it would imply that they have some faulty systems. So what we did is we recreated our own airline, and then we could build upon that fiction.
We did all sorts of permutations, probably 45 to 50 different names, trying to get a name cleared, and ultimately ended up with Southjet Airlines, which surprisingly wasn't taken by anybody. We have our own credit card like a lot of airlines do, and it says "So Smart," you know, or coffee cup, "So Joe," and all those things that just make it feel like it's familiar and that you've been on this airline.
It's something when you're in a movie, you know, we get to play with all of the best toys and the best props at the highest level. We have an actual airplane there, and we're up in a scaffolding, sort of looking at the entire scene that's laid out before us.
You see this plane, like this, you know, dinosaur, you know, just kind of broken into pieces, like in the middle of this field.
So what I'm thinking is we'll go this way until he pulls the binoculars out, and then we'll come back down this way for the rest of the deal.
You can see on initial impact, the left wing hit the ground.
It's our biggest set piece, the largest I've ever built for a key moment in a movie. We not only set our crashed plane out here in the field, but in addition to that, we built a church, which is sitting up on the bluff over here.
Probably one of the biggest challenges of putting this together is the expanse, but getting plane parts from 2 different states, getting them traveled here, the logistics of that, the permits to drive across country, the cranes that are needed to lift each of these pieces, ways to cut things apart so that they'd be small enough to transport, but then could actually come back together in a way that would make it look like they hadn't been cut apart to transport.
We took a shear that's attached to an excavator, and it's like a pair of scissors, and we just nipped at it, and that's how this break was created.
Let's all join us here for a safety meeting, please. Thank you. We have fire, we have smoke, we have extras, we have stuntmen. We have real Clayton County fire people. They know what to do. If there's a flame that gets out of control, walk away, these guys will take care of it.
Speed, free marker.
There's a wonderful quote by Francois Truffaut, which I subscribe to, and he said, "A movie that works is the perfect blend of truth and spectacle." And I think this one is that. It's a hopeful, redemptive human story that's sort of wrapped in this very, very intense spectacle. And to me, that's what movies are all about.
And cut.
Looks like some chaos to me.
Every pilot would always say to me, do you have a fear of flying? I'm like, yeah, I have a fear of flying. I get it, the physics, it's been explained to me, but I still don't care. I'm in something that's metal, that weighs however many tons, that's going 500 miles an hour, a few miles above the earth. So when I get in an airplane, I'm giving the keys to somebody who's gonna fly me somewhere. It's like, okay, I don't know anything about them. I don't like to get in cars with people who are driving that I don't know. A plane should be no different.
We're at a positive rate.
You know, we have a history of incidents that we could draw from, and we researched them all. And our fictional plane crash is loosely based on a lot of incidents that happened over the last couple of decades.
It's quite terrifying what we're trying to do, recreate this heroic crash landing, which is going through this turbulent air flight, people turning and flipping. It's quite chaotic and fun.
Actually, I'm a pilot, and I love airplanes. And the thing that is interesting about an airplane incident is that we can all relate to it because we live our lives on airplanes. And when something goes wrong on an airplane, it's very dramatic, and it lends itself to great cinema.
Tammy, sit back down!
Everything about the major flight sequences are storyboarded. They're all done also in the computer as an animatic.
Abbott, flaps! Flaps off, Margaret! Full power! Abbott, trim up! Gear up!
What the previs did is it gave us an idea of what are the shots that Bob wants, and then we could plan and measure and really get everything lined up so that we know exactly what we need to do on the day of the shoot.
Boom that way. Now that's the shot we want. Kid falls, boom, that's good. Now the plane goes back around, and it stops at 90 degrees, and keep going. Stop, cube, 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 keep going. See, that's pretty good. You almost got it, so there.
We lost the left engine!
Let it roll.
The majority of this is seeing it from the captain's point of view.
And we'll flop around and we'll do the whole scene again, so we get with you on the box.
thing?
Yeah. So that's
my favorite.
Next two, yeah, it's all good.
Denzel, you know, he doesn't want to have someone else in there doing his stunts, and that's great that he approaches it from that point of view. Obviously, if something is going to be too dangerous for him, or you know, we feel that it's dangerous, then we talk to him about it, we work through it, but he's a trooper.
You get to get in a thing and act like you're flying a plane and hang upside down. You know, it's still being a kid. I mean, that's the fun of it. That's I got a great job.
Yeah, I'm talking now.
We have three basic kind of gimbals helping operate our plane. One is motion base. It does not take the full weight of the whole plane, so we have to use just sections when we're filming on that piece. And so we can really get the plane as it starts to invert in the story.
We're at a positive rate. You're up.
Doing the research on our script and going through it with our director, we realized that the plane goes through different layers of trouble. So we've chosen to use softer methods for the buffeting through the clouds, which would be airbags, which we can control that weight and move it up and down and kind of give it the idea that we're floating through clouds.
It's kind of like if you had a 64 Impala that you were looking to hop up and down. Yeah, but you have, you know, what is a huge wide body fuselage hopping up and down. And I got uncomfortable just watching the monitor. I was like, I just kept saying, I don't want to be on that plane. And everyone's like, we're on a stage. I was like, I don't care. I still don't want to be on that plane.
And right. And center.
In the process of doing my research, there was a black box recording that I read of a plane that had had an incident with their tail. As this plane rolled over on them, the pilots were commenting back and forth, at least upside down, we're flying.
There was an air show where they did take a 707, invert it, and go through a barrel roll and show that, yes, it can happen. Is it something that we, as you know, I'm a flight instructor, do we as instructors go through that with the students? No.
We have a more complicated rig. We've been jokingly calling the rotisserie because it's like what you would actually put on a spit over a grill.
Okay, roll the plane, please. On a 3 count. 3, 2, 1.
We have the plane fit into steel rings, and we're able to invert it. And the people inside, hair, necklaces, you name it, it's all reacting to what gravity would really do.
It was a very complicated scene, and you know, hanging about 50 people upside down is time-consuming and scary to do.
Now let's go to 90.
Our gimbal has been designed to support the weight of our plane, which is around 8,000 to 10,000 pounds, and then 40 people. We're averaging about 185 per person. We're trying to be kind to some and a little cruel to others. And so 30,000 pounds roughly we're going to turn upside down. Some of it human, some of it just in steel and weight.
And action.
One of the reasons we used a real airplane to roll upside down versus building a fake one ourselves is because they're actually built to withstand the stresses of going upside down. The seats here can actually take a load of 9 to 12 Gs before they give out.
Come on, Dad! Come on, I'm here! Isn't that great? It's terrifying. Good stuff, Charlie.
We can't put the entire fuselage of the plane, all 17 rows, on this rotisserie at once. So what we decided to do is cut it in half. And then we're actually digitally seaming them together. When we go to shoot the front part of the plane, it's actually going to look like this in front of the camera. So having the green helps Bob to see what his shot is actually going to look like at the end of the day.
The safety advisors that we had on the set said we could hang the people upside down for a minute. And then we had to turn everybody right side up again. And we warned everyone not to eat a large breakfast or a large lunch because you're going to be turned upside down. So luckily we didn't have any accidents.
Thank you. Thank you for coming with us. Hope you enjoyed your flight.
What are you talking about?
Bob, at full power.
It's pretty horrific what happens, and I don't think they'll be showing it on airplanes in the future.
50.
Good evening. We are here. We are ready to go. My name is John Horn. I'm from the Los Angeles Times. Thank you all for joining us. I am joined by the cast and crew of Flight. Mr. Denzel Washington has taken ill, so will not be able to join us this evening and sends his regrets. From my left, all the way across, Brian Garrity, Tamara Tooney, John Gatens, Robert Zemekis, Don Cheadle, John Goodman, Bruce Greenwood, Melissa Leo, and James Badge Dale. I want to start with John Gatens. John, this movie started with what was for you a terrifying plane trip, but not in the normal way. Explain what happened on that flight about 12 years ago.
The personal way in for me is that, you know, I got sober when I was 25, and that kind of informed this big period of my life that still exists, thankfully. But I became a really nervous flyer after I got sober for some reason. And I was flying for work a lot, and I was flying back from Germany from work, and there was this pilot sat down next to me in his pilot blues. This guy just kept talking to me, and I really wanted him to shut up, and I couldn't figure out what was annoying me about this guy so much. And what I realized was that my vision of my pilot who's flying the plane, who I cede control to whenever I get into an airplane, is that he's going to be this perfect, God-fearing soldier who's going to take a bullet for me to get me to JFK. And I was like, I don't want to know that your wife hates you, or that, you know, you got big problems, or you're circling the drain, or you've got some addiction problem, you're an alcoholic. And then I had that writer moment of like, what if? Like, what if this guy is that? And then what if I put him in this extraordinary, like, situation? And
it took a long time for that to come together, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was 1999. So, I mean, I wrote the first 40 pages of the script, which are mostly what you see here. And, you know, it took lots of turns and false starts and going back and starting and stopping and picking it up and putting it down. And I always say, like, I had no children when I started writing that movie, and now I have 3, and they're, like, big.
Robert, you come across the script, and I think at this point, Denzel Washington is interested in playing the part. How do you respond to the material, and where does your response to it start?
I fell in love with the screenplay. I thought it was one of the most interesting, complex things I had ever read. All my advisors and my agent and everyone said, oh, Bob, you can't do another movie with a plane crash in it, because I had done Castaway. I love the screenplay for all the other reasons. I love the all the emotional ambiguity of the entire piece, of all the characters, of everything that was in it, and yet it was incredibly dramatic and suspenseful. And I had heard that Denzel was interested in doing it, and when I read the piece, I thought he would be perfect for it. And so we got together and decided that we'll give it a go.
We haven't talked much about media in this film and what it has to say about hero and how we identify heroes. Was that something you were very specifically interested in at the outset, about the different side to a hero and where we don't really get the full picture of who these people might be?
That was always in the screenplay. That was like one more layer of misery that was layered onto Whip, I thought, because, you know, he had to carry around the fact that, you know, he is a complete, you know, screw up. And, you know, and everyone in the world is calling him a hero. On top of all his other problems, he's got that one as well.
The movie also has a lot to say about faith and about beliefs. I mean, God is my co-pilot here. I mean, and it doesn't feel as inauthentic. And I don't know if, John, if that's something you wrote from or something you gave the actors to do.
I think that, you know, I heard the expression many years ago that there's no atheists in a foxhole. And my experience is that there's no atheists in a plane at 30,000 feet that's pitching all over the place. And I think that when people go through dramatic events, whether it's losing someone in a plane crash or being in a plane crash or having someone sick in your life, you start reaching for all these tools, and the big one in the bag is usually like, what do I believe? What's on the other side?
Question from Pasadena for Tamara. Do you think this changed the way you think about flight attendants and air travel and crew responsibilities?
When I get on the plane, I always poke my head into the cabin now and take a big sniff just to make sure everybody's cool. Just kidding. Just kidding. But, you know, we trained with real flight attendants, and so we did like a little crash course on being a flight attendant and stuff.
So to speak.
So, no pun intended, exactly. But it was, you know, it was really great to train with them. And ironically, my husband and I took a trip earlier this year on the airline who we actually trained with, and some of them were actually fans of mine. And so you know, they treated us really well. And then I told them, I said, I trained with your company for the movie, the Denzel movie, and they were like, great, did you do the announcements and stuff? And I was like, oh yes, you know, ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign, blah, blah. And they were like, come here. So as we were landing, they gave me the microphone, and so I brought the plane in. It was great.
This question, fortunately, is for Brian. What was it like filming the crash sequence, and how did you prepare for it?
That was completely scary, intense, and having the motion cockpit and Denzel next to you was frightening enough at the small space. It was actually very easy, you know. We went down to Delta and trained with a few of the pilots down there, and they had us flying the
the simulator and taking off in that, and that was really difficult. And learning all the technical language and speaking to the air traffic controls, like near impossible, I'd say, just to get the cadence right and the quickness of it. But fortunately, I didn't have to learn how to land the plane. Just
Put in a lot
take
of
it off.
hours. Do you remember how many hours you put in? You put in a lot.
I probably put in about 14 hours. Yeah.
14, yeah. He's got 14 hours. You put it in your logbook.
Yeah.
That's good training.
Yeah. But you told me you'd know if I was faking it, so.
I felt pretty clearly from the onset that he had a very defensible position. I mean, in fact, there's a lot of question as to whether or not his ability to do what he did, Whip's ability as a pilot to do what he did, was predicated on the fact that he was intuitive and that he was in an altered state where he wasn't just going by the book, where he threw the manual out the window and went, okay, I'm high and I'm on, alcohol, let me just flip this thing over and make it happen. I don't know that you do that in a sober state. And that's an argument that can be made. And the question of, quote unquote, throwing his friend under the bus at the end, I always really felt like were she to have the ability to speak from the grave, she would probably say, take the pass. I did have these issues in my past. I don't want you to throw your life away. I mean, I'm imagining this conversation where he to speak to his dead friend, who was his lover as well. I don't want you to spend the rest of your life in jail. To what end? Save yourself, get out, go ahead, say I drank it. What's the harm?
Mm-hmm. John Goodman, where would you put Harling's moral compass? What direction does it point?
It's rapidly spinning in all directions. Not unlike Harling himself. His moral compass is his loyalty to his friend Whip, and there's a lot of hero worship involved. It's also in his mind being on TV as the hero's friend, but he lives a life of immediate gratification. So he just wants to ease things for his pal.
I didn't know if he wanted me to be angry with Whip or chastising Whip or treat him like I was his mother, or how did he see it landing himself? And Bob just said very simply he wanted me to extract the truth from Whip, and that Ellen just wanted the truth. So that's what I tried to do for him.
Not very often you read a script that's kind of actor-proof, and I read this and I thought, this is virtually every word in it feels real enough that John had done so much homework for us in terms of the vernacular, the different cadences of the different characters, that after it was 150 pages long or something, and I thought, how
took forever to read. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things where you go, well, this is never going to end up as. Never going to end up in the movie, all this stuff, but somehow it did, because it just unfolds in such a compelling way. So I read it and then campaigned to get it.
Everything was pretty much on the page. There was no intent to try to be funny.
But John has got impeccable comedy timing, and he was able to just do it and make every single moment really, 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 really funny. At the end of this film, I saw this film as a very hopeful film. It's one, I always felt that it was, if you're still breathing, you've got a chance. To get to that light place, you have to start in the dark place. I mean, so it was always there on the page, and this is the movie that I signed on to do, and I had to be true to the screenplay the way it was written.
What were the things that scared you?
All the things that attracted me to the script are the things that terrified me. It flies in the face of convention to put the giant action scene at the beginning of the movie. But the great spectacle that follows after are all these performances, and Denzel's performance, obviously, and everyone here, too. So that actually turned out to work out great. The other thing is the scene that that we did with James and Denzel and Kelly, because that's all, when I got to that scene on page 40, when I read the script the first time, I went, wow, this is great, but can we do this? I mean, can you do this in a modern movie? Can you basically just have three people standing on marks talking about all this esoteric stuff? And but I loved the scene so much, and we had to go. We just had to go for it.
The most important thing in that moment, and in my experiences of watching people die, is that they become more present. The closer they come to that moment, the more present they are, the more connected they are to the people in the room with them.
I had many different ways to go, and at one point it turned into like this, they met in rehab and had a love story, and I wrote a whole movie and it didn't work, and it's like I had to throw it out and start over, so there was a lot of stopping and starting. And I was also really nervous, and when Bob actually came on, and there was this 2007 draft that we all reference and Denzel always carried around with him, and we would talk about and refer because that was really the basis of where we ended. But Bob said to me, look, you have very commercial instincts as a writer. He's like, which are great. He's like, but forget that for now and trust the instinct where you started and tell this character story. Because I had scenes, and I kept saying to him, look, I want to show you these other things I wrote. There's great scenes between what would have been Melissa Leo and Don Cheadle, where it's like they're having these great political, interesting kind of moral arguments about what he did and did he earn it and everything else. And Bob kept saying, that's not in Whip's purview. It's like you have to stay in his point of view. And I was like, I just kept thinking like, oh no, it has to be a genre movie. It has to be, I guess it needs to be a courtroom thriller, or it has to be, and he kept saying, no, point of view, point of view. So I totally looked to Bob because I didn't think you could really make a movie like that.
John had it there on the page, and I mean, there was one little sleight of hand scene that we did, and that's the scene where it's Don's scene with the owner of the airline, which was crucial to understand everything that was going to happen on this Tox report, and it would have been the only time in the movie that the movie would have changed point of view. So came up with this really clever device. So just having Whip, and Whip couldn't be there obviously because they were. We put him outside. We became mechanical. We put him outside the window, so it didn't really feel that much like the movie changed point of view at that time. At that point, and it had to. But to answer the gentleman's question, the hardest thing for me was I was concerned about the very tight schedule, having very little money, because it was such delicate material. If I didn't have enough time, was I going to be able to do it? But I had such a great cast. I mean, nobody missed a beat. Everybody, stepped up to the line, and we really they just were there, and their choices were all perfect. We didn't lift any scenes. We just shortened them.
And is that generally the case, or just on this?
No. Generally, it's not. It's generally not the case. It's very seldom does that happen. But that just speaks to how well the screenplay was written.